Hello everyone, I'm Brian. Today I'm reacting to Ask Swami with Swami Sarvapriyananda, February 19th, 2017. I could have sworn I did a Q&A with, react to a Q&A of Swami Sarvapriyananda. I didn't do a Q&A with him. But I'm curious. Questions specifically asked are generally pretty interesting to me because they tend to focus on something. And it's usually, there's a wide variety of topics that's covered. So let's go ahead and get started with this one. I can't believe this is my first one. This is back in 2017 though, so...
So now, what we are going to do is
no CC.
Have some question answers. Let's interact. Not only with the people you are present, but in the world that we live in, this 21st century world, there are tens of thousands of people present in a virtual way. So there are questions from all parts of the world. Some of those questions we'll read out today and I'll respond to them. But the questions are common questions. As I said, we all are walking on the same path, and no doubt that's the reason we have got all these questions which are in common. We have the same problems, same doubts, same questions. So what they ask is relevant to all of us. So please do listen carefully to the question and to the answers. I'll request Diane to read out the first of those questions. Is there a microphone? Yes. And the way this will work is, after this, I'll ask for questions from the audience, and you can raise your hands. I'll call one of you. Please come, and there's a seat reserved for you here. And then you'll use the microphone, tell us your name, tell us your question, and wait there till I answer it, and then you can go back to your seat. But first, a question from the world community. Yes, Diane.
The first questions have to do with why there is so much suffering in the world. And this email comes from Saptashi, who is 19 years old. He has been a student at the Narendrapur Ramakrishna Mission Vidyalaya in Kolkata and is currently studying at a medical college, where in the hospital he is regularly confronted with sorrow and death. And as he says, he has seen the heartbreaking cry of a poor loving mother who lost her 9-year-old son to disease. So he asks, if there is suffering because we do not know our true nature as Brahman, then why did Brahman deliberately manifest this world of Maya where suffering exists? Or does suffering exist because, as Thakur said, this is the Leela of the Supreme or God? If so, then what kind of God is he or she who likes creatures to suffer? Is this God mad or insane or cruel, who likes to hear the cry of people and then wants to search for him? Or is it because God is aware of the fact that, oh, these little creatures do not matter because everything took birth from me and eventually everything is going to end in me? The whole creation is going to end. Let them cry, so what? And we also had a similar email from Deepan, who asks, if there's no external God as such, and it's all within our own self, then whom to pray to and seek protection from adversities and danger? If there is an external God to whom the majority of the world's population pray, why is there so much turmoil, innocent killings, heinous crime happening all over the globe, and God doesn't stop them or save the innocents when humanity itself is being devastated? Is this all a myth then?
The one story, I'm trying to remember who said it. I can't remember which Guru Swami said it, but the story that I liked was the fact it was it was probably said Guru actually, because it was of Shiva went and cut off the head of Brahma, and because Shiva looked down, was it because the reason why I cut off his Brahma's head? Anyway, Shiva got mad at Brahma because of the suffering that was going on in the world. He said, why would you create such a thing? How could you let your subjects suffer, or something along those lines, not verbatim, but basically, why are you letting these people suffer? And Brahma said, I'm not letting them suffer. They have free will to do as they wish. I am not making them suffer. They themselves are choosing things that are causing them to suffer. This is not verbatim, it's something along those lines. I remember ideas, not precise quotes, and I really like that. So look at it from an atheistic point of view, is the fact that that is very much true. We do have, in some sense, free will. We are, in some sense, deterministic. That's a whole different argument. But we do have some sense of free will, and we do choose to do certain things. And in terms of, say, if you don't believe in the Turiya or Brahma, we're all chemicals, and I'm trying to get kind of three dimensions of this thing here. The materialistic dimension, which is basically we are nothing but chemicals, and we can realize certain things in our life. What will cause us pain, why it causes. If here's how I deal with it. If we can understand the problem, we can cope. We can not suffer. That's how I've done it. Again, it doesn't work 100% of the time. Extreme suffering, like loss of a loved one, it's very difficult to separate yourself from that. But if you can understand certain things in life that would normally cause you suffering, you cannot suffer from that. Because if you understand it, you know what you can do, and you can either stop it or you can allow it. Now, in terms of Advaita Vedanta, it's because of our identities, as far as I can remember. Again, and the fact that this body, this mind, the thoughts and emotions are not you. The true self of you is Turiya, which is unaffected by the material world, by your thoughts, by your emotions, and by your body. And that's also, in a sense, a way of separating yourself from that you can realize those things are not you. And when you can do that, you're able to not suffer along with the body. The weirdest thing that I've come to realize when watching this video is just the fact that the body still suffers through your thoughts, through your emotions, and through physical pain. And you can never separate that from the body. The body will always suffer, but you yourself doesn't have to suffer along with that. The karmic actions will continue to go on with that body and to continue on with another body, but you yourself are unaffected by that. If you can come to that realization, then you can be liberated. I don't know if it's 100%, I'm not sure, but again, something that I've learned with Advaita Vedanta, and something myself that I've come with is essentially the same to some degree, that you can realize certain emotions, certain things that would cause suffering to you, and if you're able to understand why, you're able to better handle it.
All right. Real heavy stuff to start off with. Yes, but it's a very serious question. I'm sure all of us, we have had this question at some time or the other. We have this question all the time. Why is there suffering in the world if God exists? Now, I'll give you two answers. First, a detailed discussion, directly I'll respond to the question, and then a deeper answer, the second one later on. First of all, this question itself. Why is there suffering in the world if God exists? Why is there evil in the world if God exists? This question has been asked by people throughout the ages, and it continues to be asked. And theologians and philosophers in all cultures, in all religions have tried to respond to this. Notice one thing here. Our idea of God is that God is all-powerful and all good. So if God is all-powerful and all good, God loves us and God is good, then suffering should not be there. If one of these conditions are not satisfied, then there can be suffering actually. Imagine a God who is all-powerful but not all good. A cosmic dictator in the sky. Extremely powerful, can do whatever he, she or it wishes. Then you wouldn't ask why there is suffering. You would say, yeah, because the big guy up in the sky is a dictator, so that's why we are
I like that.
Suffering. And it was so in a certain phase of human history. I was very interested to find out that the old story of Noah's Ark, there was a great flood. There's a flood myth in many ancient cultures of the world. So there was a great flood. And do you know why the flood was there? Because God found a lot of unrighteousness in the world, and so sent a flood to wipe out all this unrighteousness and to restore justice and order in the world.
I will say one thing real quick, just in case people forgot. He's also all-knowing, meaning that he knows. You ask him what's going to happen 1 billion years in the future, quintillion years to the quintillionth power in the future, he'll know. So he already knew this. He was going to do this before he even created man, according to this biblical story. So that's the kind of the funny thing, kind of like if you're familiar with the Adam and Eve story, where he says, Adam, don't eat the apple from the tree. He already knew that Eve was going to eat the apple and then persuade Adam to eat the apple. He already knew that. So I don't even know why he didn't. He's like, oh, everyone was bad. Let me just wipe everyone out because I didn't realize they were going to be bad. That's the kind of thing I kind of want to ask. Is like, this is where a lot of people will say this is all going according to God's plan. So him wiping out the earth was going according to God's plan. And I'm sure people can rationalize that. I think I can to some degree.
Now that's a good God, a righteous God. But the same story exists in a more ancient culture, in Babylon. And the story is slightly different in one very interesting detail. There, in the story, God is there, all-powerful, but only all-powerful. The idea of being just or good is not there. Just God is all-powerful. Then what happens? This God is disturbed by the noise that humanity makes. God's rest was disturbed because human beings are very noisy. So he decided, I'll wipe them all out. I'll drown them all. And then is this righteous person whom he selects, just like Noah. The names are different. They're difficult names. I've forgotten the names. But he gives them an ark in which to take animals 2 by 2 and preserve them until the flood tides go down, and then all life can be restarted.
I do wonder if I know the Bible has taken many stories from even pagan religions and holidays for that matter. I'm wondering if the Christian religion took that Noah's Ark story from this, or is it because there's been floods that has happened around the world, and this is what I was talking about, and I think in the archaeology reaction that I did, like the 100,000 years or something like that, where even in American people who live in Mexico back in the day, the Mayans, I think they also had a flood in their calendar as well, even though they had no interaction with Christians.
And hopefully they'll be quieter next time. There is no concept of goodness or righteousness or fairness or justice there. It's just power. There you cannot ask, why are we suffering? Because God is all-powerful. God can make us suffer. But when the idea of justice and goodness was added, as it happened in Judaism next, the same story, you see how it takes a turn. Now you cannot say God drowned people because they were noisy. We wouldn't worship such a God. So the idea of concept of God as fair, as just, comes in there.
Who would worship such a God? Well, actually, you would, if you were told that you would be burning in eternal damnation for the rest of eternity. Unless you believe in that God and worship that God. So everyone, in a sense. So it's like, why would you worship a cruel God? It's like, well, if you don't, he'll be cruel to you for all eternity. So that's a pretty good reason to worship a God, because eternal suffering.
You can see an evolution in our concept of God. God is not evolving. Our concept of God is evolving. We are understanding more and more. And then the question can arise, why is there so much evil and suffering in the world? If God is all-powerful, but also just. And the problem becomes even more complicated when you say God is all-loving.
Yeah.
Right? It may be that we deserve suffering, so it's just to punish us. But a loving God would not want us to suffer. Imagine parents. You love your children so much, you would never want your children to suffer. The only reason children suffer is because human parents are not all-powerful. They cannot prevent that suffering. He mentions a mother crying because she lost her child to disease. If she could have, she would have definitely saved the child. She can't. So when you combine omnipotence with benevolence, then this question arises. Really God loves us, okay, and really God can do everything, then why do we suffer? And an answer is necessary. Otherwise it shakes faith. In fact, one of the arguments against the existence of God is the existence of evil. This is called the problem of evil in theology. In different religions of the world, this is called the problem of evil. And we want an answer. Well, I'll tell you about not one answer, but 23. Don't worry, I will not list out all the 23 answers. There's this book.
I will say this. I'm wondering if this will be one of the answers. It's the fact that everything is going according to God's plan. So even though God wiped out all species and everything on earth except for 2 of every animal and Noah and Noah's Ark, it's because all this is to set up the future. He knows that this is the way that he wants things to go, and this is the way that it has to go for things to work out the way he wants it, I suppose. It's kind of weird. It's like he couldn't just like that and all of a sudden everything goes the way he does. I guess he much preferred to do it theatrically and show his power to the people. But yeah, basically you can say it's all going to according to God's plan, and that kind of removes a lot of things. So if it's your suffering is going according to God's plan. If you're going to die, if you're going to live, if there's war, if there's the children's death, etc., etc. If you just say it's all going according to God's plan, it erases every doubt, every question. Because if it's going according to his plan, then there's nothing to argue against. So it's kind of like I don't know how do you say that kind of phrase, but it's basically it literally leaves nothing. It leaves no questions to ask, because if it's going to his plan, then it's going to his plan. You may not know why, you may not know how, you may not do anything about it, but if it's going according to his plan, then that's it.
The Problem of Evil in Indian Thought by Professor Arthur Herman. Arthur Herman. You can find it online also. What this gentleman has done is not only limited himself to Indian thought, but he has taken a survey of this question and the answers to it in different religions of the world, not only in religion, in philosophy, in literature, and he has come up with a list of 23 answers. 23 answers to this question. Why do we suffer in this world? And he has listed those answers. I'll tell you some of them. You're looking amazed. 23 answers. I thought the question was not answerable. 23 answers. Yes, I'll tell you some of them. Prepare to be underwhelmed. You will notice one thing about the answers. Some of them are simple, maybe a little silly. Some of them are very clever, but all of them have one thing in common. They are not satisfying.
Ooh.
For example, there is one answer is God is testing us. These are actually serious theories put forward by some thinkers at some time in human history.
I forgot about
God
that
is testing us. But then the same question will arise. What kind of a test is it to make a baby suffer?
Yeah, and I forgot about that. I haven't heard that in a while, I guess. That's why. And that's another thing, is the fact that why is there suffering? Well, God is testing you. Testing your faith in Him.
What can the baby do? Look at the enormous suffering in the animal kingdom. What can they do except suffer? What test can they pass? So there are objections to these theories.
Real quick, animal kingdom though, I don't think at least in terms of Christians or Catholic, I don't think animals have souls. They're there for us, and that's it.
There's a similar theory which says another answer. It's called a soul-making theory. God is building up our character by suffering. It might work for an adult person who is responsible, who is conscious, and who can change. But again, the same objection will arise. How do you account for the suffering? Enormous, unchanging suffering in the animal kingdom for millions of years, and nothing that you can do will stop it. When a lion jumps upon a deer and eats it, when a lizard, a gecko catches an insect, no matter what you may say, if you look at the insect struggling, you feel suffering there.
Well, so he's talking about the person feeling suffering. Well, that's a test to you. But in terms of the animals don't have souls. As far as I remember them saying, I think Christians and Catholic don't believe that animals have souls. Only humans have souls.
How can you stop that? And how is that building up anybody's character? The Holocaust. Tremendous. You cannot explain that kind of suffering, where millions of people are killed, just massacred. So how is that building up character in any way? So there are doubts about this kind of theory also. And there are many, many other theories. All of them have some problem or the other. And this professor discusses each of them and shows the problems with these theories. There's a theory that God has given us free will. That's one big theory. God has given us free will and God will not interfere with our choices. And it's our choices that lead to suffering. But even there, we have these dispositions which lead us to slip and make mistakes and commit error and evil. And what kind of a responsible parent is it who gives a loaded gun to a toddler? Free will, I will not interfere. Let the toddler do what it wants with the gun. The end will not be good.
That's not a bad idea. I was going to say the solution to that, at least I think what they would say is forgiveness, because that's something that they've I was going to say they created, but that's something that they say that if you commit sin, you can ask for forgiveness and have your sins washed away.
So why give us free will and a set of dispositions which almost all the time we tend to misuse that free will? And again, it does not explain suffering in the animal kingdom or even for helpless infants and children. So all these theories, one more theory which he considers very good, the professor, he says the law of karma, causation, cause and effect. Cause and effect. If we consider ourselves as conscious beings traveling from life to life and enjoying and suffering the results of our past karma, generating new karma and enjoying or suffering the results thereof. So we are building our own lives. Vivekananda says, there was never a blow that was undeserved. Unkind thing to say. But let's take responsibility for our own lives. You can even see how the global kind of thing, the cause and effect. Causes have effects. Actions have consequences. That can actually even explain the sufferings in where you are helpless. Say, somebody said, what karma can a butterfly do? Nothing. It can only experience the results of past karma. You can only do conscious karma when you come to a human birth. But this cause and effect can actually explain suffering and experience in
children,
animal life, in any kind of conscious life.
Oh, yeah.
So past karma is giving results. Sometimes it may be in human birth, sometimes I may be an infant, sometimes I may be an insect in the mouth of a gecko, which is all past karma.
Real quick, so question here. So it's he said that no punch is undeserved. So imagine you're just walking by and someone just punches you. If no punch is undeserved, that guy that punches you, did he just produce bad karma because of it? Or is it good karma because you deserved it? I do wonder. Let me know, because I honestly have not heard that being said, that there's no punch undeserved from even Swami himself until just now, nor have I heard it from anyone else. Is that something that they say, that no punch is undeserved? And if so, if someone were to punch you, the person that punched you, is that good karma or bad karma? Let me know, because honestly I have no idea, because I'm not sure. That's the first time I've ever heard that. I would assume bad, because you're causing physical suffering to someone else. But at the same time, if it's deserved, it should be good, which is conflict of causing physical suffering.
A little more clever answer this time. This answer is, in fact, the professor says this is the best possible solution. He's got a whole chapter on the defects of the law of karma. Whole chapter. And he says, in spite of these defects, there's nothing else that comes close to the law of karma. Even then, it's not a perfect theory. Sri Ramakrishna was asked this. One of the questioners mentions the theory of Leela. Sri Ramakrishna says it is the Leela of God. Somebody asked Sri Ramakrishna, why is there so much suffering in the world if God exists? The same question. In the gospel you will find this question. And Sri Ramakrishna gives the answer which this young boy has given. That it is the Leela of God. It is the play of God. What can we do? And the devotee who asked this question did not take it well. His reply was, it may be the Leela of God, but it is death to us. In Bengali he said, Tar to Leela, Ramra Mori. It may be the divine play of God. It's play for God. It's death for us. Then Sri Ramakrishna gives the real reply. Now I'm coming to the real reply which I would like to give. When he says it's death to us, Sri Ramakrishna said just one little thing, after which there was no further question possible. Sri Ramakrishna said, death to us you say, but who are you? Do you know who you are? Meaning thereby, if you did investigate who you are, that's what Vedanta does, what would you find? You are one with God. The same God who manifests this universe is you yourself. What we sang, Satyam Jnanam Anantam Brahma, you are that. From that point of view, no evil touches you or anybody else. Think about it.
So, wow, okay. So basically this entire life is a play of yourself, a play that you create. I see that to some degree as in you have the ability to change the life that you have, this play of your life. You have the ability to change that is what is around you to some degree. I'm wondering, so for example, you get the house, you can make the house what you want it. You can put on whatever clothes you want. It's all part of this play. This house, you can create it to be all fancy colors and whatnot. It's part of the play. You going out into the park and interacting with people, it's all part of your play. How you interact with people is part of your play, because you are choosing to interact with people, and you are choosing how to interact with people, and you are choosing whether to keep those people as friends or not, or a mate. You are also choosing animals to be your pets or not. So all is but a play of God, which is you. I can actually believe that to a degree, you know, because again, I do believe that you have some control over the exterior in terms of objects, or non-conscious objects, non-living objects, I guess you could say. That's, okay, yeah. But with living objects and people, you don't have control over them. So in a sense, this is kind of your life is your play. You can live your life how you want, although without godlike powers, though.
Advaita says, Brahma Satyam Jagat Mithya Jiva Brahme Vanapara. Brahman, that Satyam Jnanam Anantam Brahma, infinite existence, consciousness, is the only reality. The world of appearance and suffering is an appearance, it's false. Then what about me? Am I real or false? You are one with Brahman. You are real. You are real as Brahman. I'll ask you a question. The greatest of tragedies, the worst of things, worst of suffering, it's permissible in only one case. It's even enjoyable in one case. When? Think about it. When is the only time you would not be upset with suffering? When you would even say it's good, it's great.
What? Suffering? When you're a masochist? Is that the word? When you enjoy being tortured? When it's your fetish, I guess? Where my mind goes. Yeah, I don't know. Like, maybe when your life is ended, so you can be liberated, maybe?
In a film, in art, in a story, in fiction.
Oh, okay.
If it actually did not happen, in a dream, when you wake up from that and you say, oh, thank God it was a nightmare. If it actually did not happen, then you would not be outraged, isn't it? You might even enjoy it. You might even enjoy it. But only from a place of security, from a place of safety, where you are not being touched by that suffering. So the real answer is here. No clever theory will ever satisfy your question. The question which you have, why is there suffering? I may give you the cleverest of theories. The good professor gives a law of karma, which is great. Even beyond the law of karma is the explanation given by Vedanta, Maya. That's an even better explanation, I think. Even that will not satisfy you. You know what will satisfy you? The answer to this question will be, you will get a satisfaction only when you transcend suffering. And the only way you will transcend suffering is by self-realization. By realizing that you are one with God. Moksha, nirvana, whatever you call it. The Upanishad says, Tarati shokam atmavit. The knower of the self, of Atman, transcends sorrow. That's the only way you're going to transcend sorrow.
I don't like to say this, but this is what I wish he would say instead. You are one with God. To me, that seems duality. As in, I think Christians do use that word too, because, oh, when you die, you'll be one with God. It means you will go up to heaven to see God, as God's there and you're here. I hope he would use the word that when you self-realize, when you realize that you are God. That is a little bit different. There's no separation between God and you at that point, because when you become one with God, as though God is here, and then you come over here and then become one with God, anyway, one with God. You, God, here, one with God. Duality, or God, and then you realize that you're God. No, you over here, you are God. You have always been God. You've never been separated from God. This is you. This is not you. This is you. Weird gestures there, but you get my point.
These questions are good. Answers are worth exploring. You can go and look at those 23 answers and select the one which appeals to you the most. Still, you will be underwhelmed. You will not be satisfied by that. The only thing that will satisfy you, which has satisfied anybody else in the world, is realization. Finding God, self-realization, enlightenment, whatever you call it. I think this is a good point to start asking questions. Anybody, would you care to raise your hands?
That was quite a question, I will say. Whew. I mean...
Yes, somebody from the audience?
Wise questions.
Please come here. Please come here. There's a seat here. Please tell us your name and ask your question.
Pranam Maharaj, thank you for the very insightful and deep answer. My name is Shibamoli, Shibu. The question I had is, you mentioned self-realization as the only way to transcend sorrow and misery. Now, if we look at the life of great devotees, bhaktas, we also see this other way of looking at sorrow as their chosen deity itself. Like you have come in the form of, in the garb of sorrow. Is that any different from realization, or is it a different kind of realization?
All right.
I have no idea what it said. Something, different kinds of realization.
It's a good question. Sit there. Yes, we'll talk about it. So the question, I'll sum up. The Upanishads say that self-realization is the path to transcend sorrow. But there's also another path which you find devotees surrender to God. Whatever you give, my Lord, sorrow or joy, comes from you. And that's all I want. I only want you. I accept it because it comes from you. Thou has put me in suffering. I accept it.
So it's talking about self-realization that you are God, and I think that may be the ultimate realization, or following Bhakti Yoga, which is being devoted to God and accepting and just basically living life and giving everything to God and just letting God handle everything. And that's what I was going to say a little bit earlier with the question that Swami was answering just a few minutes ago about how a lot of Christians just say, they follow God and they just, if everything's going according to God's plan, that's basically Bhakti Yoga, because they're not going to argue with what happens. They're going to say, I'm going to leave it up to God. He'll guide me. He has his path laid forward towards me. I must just continue my path, accept what happens, and just continue. That's it.
That path of surrender which a bhakta, a devotee takes. What about that? Is that a valid path? Okay. Yes, it is. In fact, these are two different attitudes. Both will give you the same result. Notice one thing here though. When I say transcends sorrow, goes beyond sorrow, it's not that the persons do not suffer. It's not that the person used to get a tummy ache earlier, now has become enlightened and doesn't get a tummy ache.
I'm sorry, I have to make this joke just to lighten the mood a little bit. But it's like, oh man, every time I drink milk, I'm lactose intolerant. I have now become enlightened. Oh my God, it's still hurting. What happened here? Sorry.
The same thing might happen. In fact, it will continue. Sri Ramakrishna, he had a cancer in the throat, and the body actually passed away. The physical death was there because of the throat cancer, and the pain was also there. What is meant by transcending? Is enlightenment a painkiller? I'm suffering a lot, I can take, Tylenol? Or I can be enlightened, one of the two. Are they substitutes? No, they are not. Transcending means you are there, right there, and yet you are not touched by it. You experience it, and yet you see a dimension of yourself which is far beyond pain. A classic example, when Hari Maharaj comes to Sri Ramakrishna is suffering from cancer, throat cancer. A doctor told me one of the worst forms of cancer, terrible suffering. He's there and Hari Maharaj asks him, Hari, he was a young boy at that time, later Swami Turiyananda, who was here in this center in fact. He was one of the early Swamis who stayed in this center, in the Vedanta Society. Sir, how are you today? And Sri Ramakrishna says, out of pain, I can't eat. Pain in the throat. And Hari says something startling. He says, but sir, I see that you are in great bliss. Now that's a cruel thing to say to a cancer patient who is suffering. But what was Sri Ramakrishna's reaction? Indignation? Outrage?
I am fine.
No. He burst out laughing and said, oh, the rascal has caught me out. The rascal has caught me out.
Oh.
There is another dimension. It does not mean that the pain is not there. It does not mean that the tumor is not there. It's there, and yet you transcend it. How you do that? You see a reality beyond that. It is a bit like you go to a very well-made Oscar-winning tragedy, a movie which you see, and you may actually cry with the hero and the sufferings of the characters there. People cry. It's not a good movie if it doesn't make you cry. If it's a tragedy, it doesn't make you cry, then it's not a good tragedy. And yet at the same time you transcend it. You know it's a story, a well-told story. So you may at one level be crying, at the other level aesthetically enjoying it also. Good art brings tears to your eyes also. In the same way, somewhat analogous way, I'm not saying exactly the same thing, it's different. You can transcend suffering when you are there. Now this can be done in two ways. You can realize, I am that Satyam Jnanam Anantam Brahma, infinite existence, consciousness, bliss, like the infinite blue sky in which clouds, some of them light and white clouds, fluffy, some of them dark and rain-bearing clouds, with thunder and lightning and hail, they pass through, and the infinite blue sky is not affected. Sorrow and suffering and pleasure and joy and birth and death, they arise in the infinite ocean of consciousness which you are. They arise there. They are revealed by that consciousness which you are. They are experienced by that consciousness. I will not even say your consciousness, you the consciousness. In you they shine, and into you they melt away again. You are completely untouched at one level, at the deepest possible level. That's one way. The other way is what he asked. If I consider myself to be an individual being, I find it difficult to shift to that plane where I am infinite consciousness, in which the body and mind are appearing. I still consider myself to be this being, separate from everything else. Is there no hope for me? Of course there is. Then that infinite existence consciousness bliss is the God of religion, to whom you can pray, you love, and you surrender. I'll repeat again. Vivekananda says, the God is the highest reading of the absolute by the human mind. That infinite existence consciousness bliss, which is your own self, the best conception that you can get of it as a limited being right now is God, the God of religion. And one can pray to such a God, one can surrender to such a God, one can love such a God. It's not a fiction. It's not a fiction. This actually answers the question of the second young man who wrote a letter, Dipan. He said, if I am Brahman, then whom do I pray to? If everything is within me, then whom am I praying to? That's the question. Notice something here. If everything is within me, if I am that infinite existence consciousness bliss, if you really feel that, you would not feel the need to pray also. If you feel the need to pray, you are not feeling that you are this infinite existence consciousness bliss. Right? So if you feel the need to pray, if you feel cut off from God, then pray to God. Love God. It's not a fiction. God exists. So, you can enjoy God in both ways. I am Brahman, or the Divine Mother, my loving Father, my loving Mother. Swami Vivekananda used to say, that always he says, I am Brahman, but only when he has a tummy ache, he says Mother. He says, I say Mother when I have a tummy ache. Humorously, but there's a point there. Right? Thank you. Thank you.
Interesting. So I was actually thinking at this point where he's talking about how Sri Ramakrishna was able to I thought of separate himself, be in eternal bliss, but yet say the doctor caught him. I'm sorry, whenever I thought of that, it just made me laugh because it's like, oh, he got me, But he was genuinely suffering. And about his question about how are you able to separate yourself. So I don't know where I'm at necessarily in terms of thought and emotion and physical body separation. Now, I don't think it's necessarily karma, bhakti, and jnana. Jnana being thought or knowledge, bhakti being emotion, and karma being the actions, your body, physical body and thoughts. Even though I don't know why I separate that, but I don't know. I don't think they're all linked. But I know Osho does do all three. And in order to get to this meditative state, Osho says to first just find a way to separate yourself from your actions, one step at a time. Get to the point where you can observe your body doing action. When the way I saw it was like a third person. It's like, I can see my body picking up the fork, washing the fork or washing the dishes, putting up the milk or whatever. I have extreme difficulty separating my actions from myself. My emotions and thoughts, on the other hand, I don't know if I necessarily separate myself from those, but I am able to understand them in such a way that I don't quite suffer the same as other people do. Things don't bother me like the way other people's do. Things don't get to me like other people's do. And I'm beginning to wonder if am I separating myself from that, or am I just understanding it? I have a feeling I'm just understanding it and not separating. So I look at this as a kind of a middle ground, again, where you have the Western ideas of things, you have the Eastern Advaita Vedanta. Let me just put it that way, of seeing things, of a separation between you and, in a sense, the physical world, your emotions, your thoughts, and your actions, physical actions. And I want to get that middle ground to where, I'm sure a lot of Westerners are going to think that this is kind of like BS kind of stuff. I did at the very, not necessarily at the very beginning, but at what point did I believe that? maybe a few years before I started reacting to Eastern philosophy. Now, I've always been open-minded about things, but because of the lack of knowledge, I do make joking things about some things. But as I watch this, I've come to understand and appreciate a lot of it. Now, but anyways, so my actions is something that I have difficulty separating. Now, do I need to separate it? I don't think so, because in terms of physical actions, that is. Just because, I guess my belief of responsibility, and perhaps maybe looked at it as like dharma as well, is that because I must be in control of this body to take responsibility to act out my dharma. If I'm understanding dharma correctly, I've heard it dharma as your role in life: father, worker, son, daughter, whatever it may be, YouTuber, viewer, and that way I don't have to separate myself from my actions, because I need to play my dharma. I need to take responsibility for my actions. But that's the difficulty I have of separating myself. But maybe now that I think about it, maybe I don't have to. My thoughts and my emotions, perhaps I do, because those things can run rampant. And those things I need to have an understanding on, a deeper understanding. That way I am not suffering. I don't suffer from my actions. So if I don't suffer from it, perhaps I don't need to separate myself from it. But my thoughts and my emotions, if I understand it, I don't suffer from it. But there are certain emotions or thoughts that are very difficult to understand, and I suffer from. So perhaps either I need to understand it better or need a way to separate myself from that. But then again, coming of that separation is basically, it's in a sense the ultimate goal, where it gets to the point where nothing is necessary other than that. You don't need to understand your emotions, you don't need to understand your thoughts, and well, I certainly hope that you always are responsible for your actions. You don't ever say, oh, that wasn't me, that was my body. You still must play your role. You still must play out your dharma. You still must play your role. You must bring kindness and goodness into the world, regardless whether it's your body or not. Whether you see it as your body or not. Okay, that's for the first part of this Asking Swami Sarvapriyananda, February 19, 2017. Oh boy, those were the days. If you like my content, please consider subscribing, thumbs up, thumbs down below. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next vid.